We're very fortunate to have Malcolm here tonight. When we were thinking a year or two ago about who we should get as a speaker next time, Malcolm came to mind. I first met Malcolm in the early 90s, probably, sailing 505s, and we went to England for the Worlds in 95, I think, down in Cornwall, and we were all in our 30s and 40s and thought we were pretty good. Malcolm turned up as a kid. Well, he was about 20, 21 probably. No, he must have been, about 20, that. 22
23 maybe.
Yeah.
3.
And whipped us. Anyway, so we realised we had a bit to learn from this kid. He stayed in 5.0s for a few more years, not for long. Went to several Worlds with David, your brother. Yeah. And then transitioned into Olympic sailing. You were always a skipper as a young guy. Won the Manly Junior Nationals, then won the Flying 11 Nationals as a steerer. But of course, when it comes to Olympic level, it's about body size, and with his body type, tall and lean, the 470 weighted him. We might just talk about junior sailing. We're going to transition through your life. It's not Roger Clemson from This Is Your Life, but see what we can do. Junior sailing, when you think of Olympic athletes, you think of the great dynasties of Australian sailing. You think Bethwaite's, Beachels, even people that have got fathers that have done a lot of sailing, like Burton's, Slingsby, there'd be many others. Your parents weren't sailors, were they? However, they were very involved in the sport, very helpful. Maybe talk through that.
Yeah, my parents had no idea about boats. Didn't know the front end or the back end. Yeah, we did have a 12-foot tinny that was used as a fishing boat, and our grandparents were fortunate enough to have a house on the Lane Cove River, so that was sort of our access to water and, I guess, connection to the water. But it wasn't until my older brother, David, came home from school one day and had a mate at school who sailed Flying 11s, and told my parents that he wanted a Flying 11, and sure enough, they were very supportive. Went and got one, and that was the first, I guess, connection to the sport. And I think I was about 6 years old when that happened. So that was quite early on, but yeah, no idea about the sport, but my parents ended up, Mum would run the canteen down at Hunters Hill, Dad would end up in the race committee. I was even saying to Mark earlier on tonight, Dad had a small keelboat, an S80, and very often that would become the race committee boat for Hunters Hill if there was an event on. So they're very supportive in, I guess, not only being parents, but within the sport as well.
And then, thinking of all those families that have been successful, at least you had older brothers. Were they early mentors for you?
They were mean, Martin. Talking about, the first experience in the boat, I remember the Flying 11, it was called Aries. It was a red wooden boat, painted red. And it was tied up to the grandparents' wharf, and the two older, meaner brothers thought it would be funny to shove me in it. I fought as much as I could. They got me in there, half swamped. I bawled my eyes. Didn't want to come back.
So when you won those two nationals, MJs, then subsequently the Flying 11s, did you have someone to coach you, help you through it, or was it natural, or where did that come from?
There was no real, I guess, systems back there in the early 80s when I started. I started in 1980 in the sport, so I guess it was probably about the mid-80s when I won the Manly Juniors, but there was no systems, there's no professional coaching that you see these days. I remember at Hunters Hill, if you ever wanted to know something, you go talk to Phil Briggs. He was the veteran of the club that had all the knowledge, and if you wanted to learn something. But saying that, there was obviously a lot of mentors in my sailing life that assisted me on the way. I remember Dave Porter, he was associated with Greenwich just across the way, sister club. He was quite a source of information, and also Ian Brown. That was more from the sail making side of things, but with One Design Sails. But he was a great source as well. But no real, I guess, professional coaching per se as you see in this day and age. And I guess my first real experience of that was when I went Olympic sailing. Sure, there was moments of Mike Fletcher's and whatnot that would do a couple of days here and there with you, and state camps and whatnot, but nothing continual, nothing really helping you around your objectives and plans and what we would say in the Olympic world, a campaign plan. You know, what are you trying to achieve, and what are the steps you got to do along the way?
So how did it all start? Pre-Olympics, I think it was after '96 Olympics, around there. You must have got an invite, did you? How did that happen?
Actually, I got an invite to sort of, I guess, have a crack at the '96 Games from Lee Napton. He wanted to do the 470. He said, "Come on, Pagey, come and get on the wire for me." And I said, "No, not interested, mate. I'm starting 5.0s. I'm thinking about the 18s and got a job, and so not my time." And but he came back to me 2 years later after the '96 Games and sort of said, "Do you want to have a go?" And I said, "Yeah, sounds pretty good. Home Olympics." So we sort of got into the 470 that mid '97 period, and our first event we did was actually the World Championships in Tel Aviv, Israel. So I can't remember exactly what time of year, but I'm guessing sort of August. But that was our first event, and believe it or not, it coincided with Viktor Kovalenko. He looked after the Ukrainian team as well as a little subcontract the Australian team, which was the preempt to him coming to the country permanently.
Right. As I understand it, he was brought to the country by Ian Brown, who you mentioned before. What changes did he bring? Because, from those eastern countries, the culture is very different. It would have been a bit of a shock to the system here, because prior to 2000, we weren't doing that well in 470s, really, were we? We were beginning to, but things had to change.
We weren't doing well in 470 for sure. Certainly in the women's division, Australia back then used to have a minimum top 12 country sort of sub-qualification within being the best boat within the country. Even though the country might be qualified to go to the Olympic Games and someone had qualified themselves within Australia, if you didn't meet the top 12 nation, Australia wouldn't send you. And in the men's division, they couldn't do that often, not since the very first Games in '76 where Australia won a bronze medal in the men's division. But the women could qualify, but not the men. And although Tom King with Owen McMahon did make the '96 Games, they did meet that top 12 criteria. I think they placed 23rd in Atlanta, if my memory's right. And then Victor came to the country, in late '97, and obviously the rest is history. Certainly from a 470 perspective, and also, I guess, an Australian perspective, his mentality, his approach. And I would also say when I say his approach, he adapted to what Australia or Western country, its strong points, and used that as well. He's obviously brilliant at his job, but he took the best from the East, the best from the West, and combined them. And he was successful before he came, but I'd almost say he's been more successful in this Australian environment. Probably means he learnt from every quad as well, but it also just shows him how he was able to adapt to the time, to the different cultures, to the different people that he was coaching every time. From men, women, all those different combinations, Eastern culture, Western culture. But he came with a discipline that we'd never seen before. Launch time actually meant launch time. And if you were, not even if you were second late, it was already too late. And if you're doing straight line, he would just take who was there and go. and he'd make you chase and chase and chase. It normally take you about an hour to get there. And as soon as you get there, you go, okay, downwind, just to send a message that you must be on time. You're disrespecting him, you're disrespecting the team, and that was one just simple example. Another example from a 470 perspective, we were trying to learn how to pump, and I remember asking him explicitly, how do I do it, Victor? And he goes, you go do it 1,000 times. You will learn. If you don't, you'll get fit. And that was his mentality. He's always playing the long game, and developing you as a person to grow up and then fulfill your dreams. And I think that's why he works with so many different athletes and backgrounds and personalities and all those different combinations that come from that.
So what does that mean, developing you as a person, I presume holistically? How did he make you a better person than you were?
He'd normally take you for a walk and talk.
Right.
I remember we were training from the Navy base, HMAS Penguin there at Balmoral, and very often we would walk that beach and end up at the coffee shop there and walk back again. But he'd be subtly always sending you a message of how to develop, how to play a situation. To have a process when you're dealing with a race scenario or building good basics. So I guess it's more, I'm thinking more from a crew work standpoint. He would focus on them so heavily that you would build up almost muscle memory in regards to that. So it frees up your brain to be able to handle the race, the pressure, the environment that will be delivered at the biggest events that you attend. But he does it in a very subtle, some ways wordless. I have never seen someone control silence like Victor. And if there was silence, you knew you were probably in trouble too. Or he was disappointed. And there was very much that aura around him all the time and the way he delivered messages. He could always say the right thing at the right time in the right way. So the message was received.
With full understanding of the type of person he was dealing with, I'd imagine.
Yes.
What about from a technical point of view? Because 470s for a long time now, for over 20 years, have been really the world's leaders. You know, in terms of rigs, centerboards, and I remember you went through a lot of centerboards through one quad.
Yep.
Was it China maybe, or London, or both?
The China quad. Yep.
China quad.
Yep.
A lot of experimentation. He has a lot of ideas. Can you talk about any of that?
Yeah, I must admit, I used to say, you know, Victor had a very much a KGB mentality, and you probably can't joke about that these days. Obviously, and I guess to add to that, Victor's from Ukraine. So it's very hard times for Victor and his wife Tatiana at the moment. But yeah, when I think about the Olympic classes, I have a saying that, you know, to win a gold medal, you've got to add up to 10, every class. But every class adds up in a different way. You know, for a laser, to me, obviously you've got to be fit because that produces speed, and you've got to be a very good tactician. Well, they're going to be, you know, part of your strong facets if you want to be successful in a laser. You know, in a skiff, it's probably very much about, you know, fast boat handling, you know, because if you can't keep it upright, you're going to be no good. So on, across the classes. To me, 470 was probably, of all the facets within our sport, it's probably the most even. And you mentioned a couple of those things there, techniques, the equipment, tactically, crew work, or you're two people, but also the delivery of that in strong wind comes quite skiff-like. So it's quite unique in that sense. And by all means, Victor is no fool. He's got a good eye, a good memory. So he can repeat things. But I would never say he's an expert. He's the expert on the person or putting together the program. He won't want to take on a 1-week program. He'll want to take on a 3-year program to develop that person, to take them to the new heights, and work on all the fine details that go in and around it. Of course, he uses our sport and our equipment and the techniques around it to deliver messages, but he's really diving in and helping you grow up as a person. Also doing a lot of that equipment development. Yes, of course, we're looking for an edge. But there's also partly, I guess, a placebo effect that comes with that. Because if you're pushing and developing and trying to get better, well, you're checking more things, you're making your toolbox more complete. So you're getting more skilled, more knowledge, and hopefully that'll work in that situation when, I don't know, someone is a little faster than you, and if you can recognise it, maybe you better change something in the boat and adapt quickly, so you're not eroding that distance that you're losing from speed. So it not only does that from a skill standpoint, but it also builds that confidence that you're doing more and you're doing stuff, hopefully, that other countries aren't doing, that will that give you an advantage. And of course, when your coach's middle name is called Medal Maker, it's a pretty powerful thing. And I even remember going through the London measurement process. Most other boats, it's very thorough, the Olympic Games, but most other boats were taking around about 1 hour to get through their hull measurement standpoint. We took 3. And that's because of the 8 events leading up to the Olympic Games. We'd won 7 of them. And the 8th event, furthest away 8th event, almost a year before, we got 2nd, and we won every other event leading up to it. So the fleet automatically thought we had an equipment advantage. Maybe we did. But I remember saying to Demetrius, the measurer, at the end of it, it's like, mate, that took a while, what's going on? He said, we heard that the Australians have spent, $80,000 on your centreboard program. I said, really, is that all? It's the wrong number, mate, it's $250,000. But, I wanted to increase the aura around it and use it to our advantage, use it as a psychological advantage. But I actually said to him at the end of it, mate, so where were we in the measurement? He said, you're right bang in the middle. There was a lot of other people that were more on the extreme. And to me, it was like, yeah, it's fun. Just me to him, but I was like, some people find it hard to look in the mirror, don't they? And that's where they got to start. And that was the confidence level that Matt and I, and of course Victor, had at that time.
So centreboards, you went through so many leading up to the Beijing Games. So it can only be area, it can be the volume, profile, shape. What else is there to it?
And the 470 rules are very restricted. There's a 4.5 kilo minimum weight, there's a 6.5 kilo maximum weight. There is a minimum and maximum cord length, and obviously length. The centreboard bolt hole has got a plus or minus of 10 mil each way. The shape, the last 100 mil, it can be turned into, into the point on either side. But when it turns, it's got to be straight. The middle section is straight, and the first 50 mil of the centreboard can be rounded. So there's very limited in what you can do. There's a minimum and maximum thickness of the centreboard as well. Of course, the centreboard case in the hull has a maximum one. So Australia, with the CSIRO's help and funding, government funding, we did a centreboard project for the Beijing Games, which is obviously still continuing today. And we got a naval architect involved, and basically once they deciphered the rules, they said, okay, we can sort of do 4 spectrums of the of within the rules measurements. And so they went and made some MDF molds and used them as our first sort of, you'd only get a couple of shots out of an MDF mold, but they used them to do experimentation. So we built centreboards of all these different sizes, short fat ones, short skinny ones, long skinny ones, long fat ones, so on, and tested them. Obviously they had the theoretical idea, but we tested all them, and us as sailors had to adjudicate what we felt on the water. So we narrowed that down quite quickly to what the shape would be and what the advantage would be. And then we started to play around with thicknesses and the twist factor. So with 470s, you can't, the way the rules are written, you cannot make a jibing centreboard. It must be symmetrical and even in the head area, which is locked off in the centreboard case. But you obviously can play around with the packing within the centreboard case, and they've actually just tightened up recently, this quad, the centreboard hole tolerance compared to the bolt, because obviously you can get a bit of slop in there as well to create a board tacking. But one thing about the 470 is you are able to swing the centreboard quite far forward. And when you're doing that, not only are you changing the centre of effort of your boat, but you're also changing the centre of effort of your centreboard, where that fulcrum point is. So if you are skilled enough in the right conditions, you are able to create twist while you're sailing the boat. So the windward tip of the centreboard can come to windward and actually create, I guess, like a jibing board scenario and help you crab into the wind, so to speak. A bit like what the canting keel yachts do. They have a front rudder and so on. So obviously you've got to have the skill to deliver that, but also it was the sort of next level development that we went into. I guess that first phase, they kept us athletes in the dark because they wanted us to really adjudicate from a feeling standpoint, to verify it from there. And then once we confirmed their theory, then when we went into that, I guess the twist and thickness, they involved us a little more in that development and what we need, the stiffness versus the twistness. And obviously it was all aimed for Beijing, which was a terrible place to have an Olympic Games. Average sea breeze of sort of 5-6 knots. And so we were, how do we fix our light wind performance? And considering that was our Achilles heel and what made us pay big in Athens 4 years earlier, it was a nemesis and a big hurdle we had to get over. And obviously that was our equipment development that I think helped us considerably. If there was any one thing, I think the centreboards was one of our strong points that we did for Beijing from an equipment standpoint. Of course, us learning how to sail light wind was the most important, but that was a real injection. I remember we made a rule, certainly after learning it from Athens, that we would never use a bit of equipment that hadn't been tested in anger, so in a proper event. But we put it in this centreboard in a coaches event just before the Olympic Games, and suddenly we were making crosses that we wouldn't normally do in light wind. And I remember Nathan saying it one day when we hit the shore, it's like, wow, Victor, I just feel like we can do something a little bit extra with this one. And we ended up running with that centreboard in the games from that confident call that Nathan made because we just felt like it was better.
Okay. We'll get on to some more technical stuff shortly. Just dialing back to the 2000 Olympics, which you tried out for with Lee, I suppose. You didn't make it. Then you did qualify for the subsequent Olympics in Athens, and there would have been some lessons along the way. Leading up to Athens, I think you'd won the Worlds in Croatia, so you're feeling pretty confident, but it didn't go as well as you hoped there. What were the lessons learned? And I think some years ago you told me that if you didn't team well, or the whole Australian sailing team didn't team well, so there was a lot to be learnt, which you would have used very well in your later life when you went to the US, which we'll talk about soon.
No, spot on, Martin. Yeah, sure, I've had some success, but I do feel like I did my apprenticeship as well. I had the full experience. Missed selection in the Sydney Games, the home Olympic Games. Going to Athens as we were ranked world number one for the 2 years leading into it, world champions, favourites, and choking, screwing it up. And there was another major lesson in that Beijing quad as well, actually. losing the World Championships 100 metres from the finish line from a pumping foul. And it was the first time they ever had a medal race, so pumping fouls were still 2 turns, even though a rules violation was only 1 turn, and the current pushed us sideways and allowed the Brits just to get inside us on the jibe mark for the finish. So they won the gold and we got silver, and that would have been 3 in a row. So there were some hard lessons in there that in many ways meant more to me from a development standpoint and moving forward. And I remember making sponsorship proposals to fund it in the Sydney Games about saying how I was going to win a gold medal. But it was just, honestly, it was just words. It sounded good, and of course I wanted it, but I didn't know how to do it. And the same thing happened in Athens for sure. We became deers in the headlights. We honestly weren't fully prepared for the event. We were great in strong wind. We were pretty good in medium wind, but Achilles' heel was light wind. And but we kept sugarcoating it. It's okay. It'll be fine. You know, Athens should be in mixed conditions, and we only got 1 day of wind, and the rest were quite light. And of course, that Olympic experience was different for us. Like I said, we're a bit of deers in the headlights, and maybe one way to explain our focus after that was when we had a debrief with Victor. We're sitting in his apartment at Fairlight. He's got a beautiful apartment that looks out over the water, over the Sound. We're sitting there, and we sort of came away. Victor always gives you 3 things. So he said, okay, 3 things we've got to do better next time round. And we kind of clarified one of them as speed. So in other words, we've got to be fast in all conditions. Without that, we're not going to do it. We've got to have a strong psychology. We're not going to worry about these Olympic Games because the boat, the wind, the current doesn't know it's Olympic Games. It's just us human beings that put on these funny uniforms and change and do something different at these events. And the last one, I'm sure Nathan's heard me saying before, so he won't have any offence. He said to Nathan specifically, Paul Forrester, who won, your counterpart that won the gold medal at the Athens Games, did he deserve it? And of course Nathan answered, oh yeah, Victor, that was his 4th Olympic Games. He won 2 silver medals leading into that. He's a really good guy. He tries hard. He trains hard. He works so hard, and he's got skill, and he's been trying so hard for that. He deserves it, Victor. And Victor just turns it back and goes, exactly, Nathan. That's what you've got to be. In other words, if you work hard and be good to the world will repay you with what you desire.
So China, you had to apply some hard lessons. You'd never been that good in light breezes. There it is. Not sailing on the grass there, that's weed. You had to drop body weight a lot, both of you I'd imagine, because even Nathan's about 6 foot tall, I'd imagine.
Yep.
You're 6'1", thereabouts. Yep. They're 2 big guys for 470s. What sort of weight did you get down to?
It was horrible. As I said, those average sea breezes of about 5-6 knots. The AIS used to poke us and prod us and put calipers on us and measure us and do all that sort of stuff. And very often I would get down to about 68 kilos at 6'1" to compete in light venues. Anyway, it was obviously a hard question we put to them for Beijing. I said, what can I get down to? And they looked at my bone density and all that stuff, and they were probably a little scared to give us an exact number or a low exact number, because obviously the well-being that comes with it. But they said to me, you probably just should trust it doing another 68 kilos. But I thought we had to do more, and I managed to get down to 66 kilos. And I did that quite early on. We had our World Championships early 2008 in Mordialloc in Melbourne in January. So I stayed at a normal sort of 70, 71 kilos, thereabouts, for that event. And then after that I said, okay, it's time for me to get down. So all our tuning, all our development, all our work that we do from now on is aimed at the Olympic Games. So I got myself down there within about a 6-week period, and then stayed at that right through to the end of the game. So for about a 6-month period. And if I ever felt bad, I would just look over at Nathan, 6 foot tall, and he used to sit around about that 63 to 65 kilos normally, and he got down to 59 kilos, but
Wow.
he did it in the last sort of 2 weeks, just before the games, because obviously the health ramifications that came with it. And sure, he's a little bit slighter build, he's not quite as broad as shoulders as me, and but still 6 foot tall, and he got down to 59 kilos. But the sad thing is we were still one of the heavier guys in the fleet, and I only trapezed in 1.5 races of the 11 race series across the week. But a funny story around Nathan on this, the Olympic Committee will measure you quite early. It's a good probably year out from the games, and they measure the whole, what they call the shadow team, everybody that's in the vying for Olympic selection. And I used to go out to Homebush and do it out there, and they were amazing. They used to have a lady from Sportscraft would be there, and she'd be measuring and someone would be scribing. And she was measured me, and then Nathan was next in line, and they're going down him, and they measured his thigh, then measured his calf. She went, hang on. Went back, measured his thigh, measured his calf. Goes, your calf's bigger than your thigh. Don't worry, I'll bump up your thigh a little bit. It'll be good. But he had, I guess his father's nickname was Sparrow, and that was for obvious reasons, and thankfully Nathan had those genes as well to get down to that weight.
So what were some of the technique things you had to learn for Beijing? You know, the known was it was going to be 5, 6, 7, 8 knots at best, whatever. What did you do with rig development and just developing your skills in those light winds?
Yeah, because like I said, we were obviously pretty large for the boat, but also naturally better in strong wind. So I learned how to sit in the dog box, as I call it, and that photo shows it right there. We started to bring, it was the first time we started to bring in double sessions per day. So often we'd meet at 7 o'clock I think then we were training out of the laser club there at Middle Harbour, the amateurs club there. And we would meet at 7 in the morning, and Victor would whack us and the girls on tow and tow us out to the heads. Before a sea breeze would come in, and I'd sit in my dog box and get almost seasick every day, sailing in no wind and learning how to do it. We also, from an equipment standpoint, some of the stuff we went, we just got to get rid of the question marks. If we want to be good in this light wind, how do we fix it? Well, these guys use this type of boat. So how about we just get one of those boats? They use this type of mast. Let's just get one of those masts. We just got some stock standard mainsails that they use as well, just to start with, and then we developed our own from that. We tried to eliminate the what ifs in many levels, and then just went and trained in those conditions, certainly when we were in Australia, day in, day out, and just went with a mentality of we've just got to keep finding something better. We've got to find something faster. The quads before, no wind, let's go kick a ball around or throw a frisbee, wait half an hour and then comes the wind. We started to go with a mentality of it's launch time, we go. And we go and do it no matter what we got. And one of the other advantages training with the girls, Alicia Chichi and Tessa Parkinson, that they were 25 kilos lighter than us, and they were very good in light wind. So it became a really great team between us, because they were really good in those conditions. So we had a good speed reference, but we were scarred, hardened from our Olympic experience already, and how we didn't want to go and do another Olympic Games and fail the Australians, fail the Olympic Committee, and stuff it up. So we, I think, brought that factor to them, and they brought that speed reference to us. And I think it was an amazing, by all means, very difficult team, because we all had strong personalities, and there were some great moments, and Paul Victor had to try to appease us. But it was also a really rewarding time, because it pushed us all to go higher and better.
And then Beijing success. To stand up and hear the national anthem, flag, all that kind of stuff. Memory still of that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Like, so many people ask me after that, what was the moment where you could sort of throw your fist in the air? We mathematically had won before the medal race. We knew that over 48 hours before the medal race. So the medal race in some ways was quite an anticlimax, even though it was the first race we'd won. But the standing on the podium was the moment that I felt that. And obviously the two teams either side of us were great rivals, great friends, a lot of respect, especially those Olympic Games. I remember those teams, we had utmost respect for each other. But the cool thing was it was our national anthem that was playing, not theirs. And that was, yeah, really special.
Well, given all the work you put in, having to endure very early morning starts, sailing in no wind, week after week after week, and your background as a team was winning in stronger conditions, that would have been very rewarding to win. Anyway, then things changed after that. I think Nathan retired from Olympic sailing. And what were you planning to do after that?
Yeah, Nathan announced it actually at those World Championships in Mordialloc, a good 6 months before the Games, that he was done after the Games, which I wasn't surprised at. I was just probably more surprised he told the media first. But I knew, actually, remember it was in Kiel Week that year. I knew then that I wanted to go on. It was sort of unfinished business. And Victor, in his wise ways, was already working on the future. He always did. Like he did with Nathan and I for the 2000 Games, he got us together in a boat to help train with the Japanese, who were training partners of the Aussies, to spike our partnership. And he already started to work on that from that perspective. Firstly, obviously, you need to get my commitment that I was going to go on. I said, yes, sure, but I'll give you a final answer after the Games. And then the day after receiving the medal in Beijing, Matt Belcher was there driving the media boats. They needed assistance in China, having, let's say, motorboat drivers that knew the sport, that wouldn't put them in front of a race boat. And so Matt was every day on the 470 course, because that was his request. But he asked to come and meet me in, what's the American coffee place? Starbucks. For a coffee that morning after. And he proposed, weird word, but proposed to me to do another 4 years while I was still, I think I might have been drunk, I don't know, maybe hungover, but proposed to do it. And I said to him, sounds great, mate, but give me 3 months, because I want to make sure all the emotions die down and be committed for you and also for me to know that was the case. And then actually 3 months to the day, we sat at Balmoral Beach having breakfast and laid out how we're going to do it for the next 3 years and 9 months to the Games.
So on you went again for another 4 years nearly with Matt, and leading up to 2012 Weymouth. There would have been a lot of adjustments. I remember some years ago you told me a bit about personality differences. Yep. Can you talk about that and how you had to adapt? Also sailing technique and types of sailing, and plus living with them or travelling with them.
Yeah.
It's like a new wife.
It is. Yeah, I tell Nathan, I went for a younger, smaller, better looking, smarter version. Go next time around. But I guess the first got to set the scene of how each of us got together. Nathan and I spent 8 years together working towards it. We lived that development, I guess, of learning how to win, the failures, all those successes. We lived at every moment, and there was more, maybe it seemed this way, but it seemed a more natural growth of a partnership and how it would balance out together. I became the boss on the shore. Nathan was the boss once we hit the water. There was a good clear process that had been built on across many years. But with Matt, obviously we got shoved together with a purpose to defend the gold medal. I was Olympic champion, 4-time world champion at that stage, and Matt, although he had placed a 4th and a 5th in the world championships up to that stage, he was very good. He'd never won a world's medal. He'd never been to Olympic Games. He certainly wasn't Olympic champion, so he came in from that position. So I've got to set that scene first. But there were very different personalities as well. Nathan, strong sailing family, one of those sailing dynasty families that we talk about. His father had been to Olympic Games. His uncle had been to Olympic Games. His auntie had been to Olympic Games. They'd been to America's Cups. They've won all these yacht events, ocean racing, you name it. Between the family, they'd done all these things. Even his uncle had won a bronze medal I know it was a demonstration class at the 84 Games. But one thing that was, not only was that, that heritage that coming through and that knowledge and that skill that he had, but also there was quite a lot of pressure from that, in that standpoint to be successful, but also, to get a gold medal for their family in many ways. Well, that's certainly the way I read it. And Nathan is nature, he's not a very great communicator. Thankfully he's got better with age, but he sort of can explode sometimes and be quite angry, and then how do you monitor that? And that was me as a crew. I'd try to be a sponge sometimes, or sometimes I'd poke him between the eyes or fight back, but it was a real delicate balance from that perspective, how to create a better team. And so I became, quite like I say, sponge and try to absorb that pressure and relieve it for him, and try to play that, that softer team person to create a better team. But then when we joined with Matt, he's quite the opposite. He's very positive about everything. He sometimes, or certainly from my perspective, I found it hard to understand understand what he said. He was 11 years my junior. Words he used sometimes, especially in the boat, the first year I used to just say yes. And then he'd say, well, why aren't we tacking that? I said, I didn't understand what you said, I just said yes. So we had to work out how to communicate. He was very positive all the time. Almost in the way I describe it, I'd always say, oh, it's okay. It's okay that we're not good at that, or it'll get better. And I became the angry guy, or the person with tension in the team, to say, no, that's not good enough. If we want to be the best in the world, we've got to be the best at it. And how do we do that? That's the important question. Let's admit that we've got the problem first, and then we can focus on how to take it forward. And so I became the angry guy in the boat, so to speak. And I remember year 3 at the quad, the plan that we put together, and it was certainly driven very much by Victor and myself opposed to Matt, was saying, mate, you need to be the boss of that quad. You need to push me around, you need to push Victor around, you need to make decisions on the shore, you need to make the decisions on the water. And that was quite a different position for Matt to be in. And I don't think it was quite as successful, that objective. Obviously it worked from a relationship standpoint and we got the job done in the games, but it was quite hard for Matt, just knowing his personality and the way he operates. Of course he's a very determined guy, but he is extremely polite and always will, in many ways, sugarcoat something when he's talking to you. So it was quite a difficult thing to manage from my side, or a new thing for me to manage from my side. And I guess one of the analogies I always say that all ropes need to have tension. Because if you don't have tension, you can't ease. But if you have too much tension, of course, either the rope snap or you can't pull it on. So there was that real delicate balance. It can't be all roses and sweet smelling. It's got to have some tension to the relationship to keep pushing, to keep developing. And even when you're number one in the world, how do you stay number one in the world? You've got to keep driving and keep that self-focus, self-coaching, what do you want to say, within that mindset to keep moving. And that was something I certainly learned after Athens, and then I became that tension in the relationship with Matt. And I think it's an amazing thing that the Australian sailing team, Victor, and it certainly was very much one of my mantras in my last quad, because I knew when I actually, 3 months after Beijing, when I said to Matt, I'm going to go ahead, I said, but I'm done after this Games. I'll be 40 years old at the Games and I'll be done. So I wanted to set up a legacy. So I actually had 3 things with Matt that I said to him non-negotiable. 2 of them were about the boat. I said, he likes blue decks. I said, no, I can't have blue decks, it's got to be grey deck. He'd like to have, this is in the same category, he'd like to have stripes in the back corner of the boat. I said, no stripes. I had to have a 1 to 2 kite halyard system, while a lot of the boats used to have a pump system, which is elasticized, still a 1 to 2 system, but it's elasticized, but it makes it hard to drop the kite. So I said, it's got to be a 1 to 2 system, so when you uncleat it, it's falling to the deck, and I've got to catch the thing before it hits the water. And I said, the other thing is, we need Australian training partners that we share everything with, and we build up, because I want to leave a legacy after when I finish. And that was something really hard for Matt, who had, by this stage, already done 2 full quads. He bought the gold medal boat in 2000. He carried the IOC flag into the closing ceremony at the Sydney Games as a 17-year-old. He went sailing with Mark Turnbull 2 days after they won the gold medal in Sydney. So he was already in the class for a long time. And he struggled with that last point, but he knew it was a non-negotiable. And I think it took him probably a good 6 months before he realised that if we couldn't be our aim was to be the best in the world. If we did that, everything else takes care of itself. Australian selection, country selection, etc. And if that's our mantra, then we'll be fine. And if another Australian's better than us, well, they deserve to go and defend that gold medal. And like I said, I think it took a good 6 months for Matt to get that, I guess, confidence or belief. And what I love about it, and especially, just after last Olympic Games, is seeing Will Ryan, achieve that, because of course I, saw him, mentored him, and gave him everything I could in that quad to continue. And obviously Matt realised that too when he knew I was hanging the old tinea-ridden wetsuit boots up, and then he had someone to work with, and obviously they joined together and won every event. I think they almost won every event for 2 years straight after the London Games. So to see Will finally get there last year is that was a really special moment for me.
So we must recollect you carried the flag at the closing ceremony in 2012. How did that come about? Did you ask for it?
Negative. No, I did not. Let me throw in a couple other things, so I can't help telling a story. But I went to 3 Olympic Games as an athlete. I had 3 highlights. For me, the Athens game was getting that green bag and getting the uniform and having the emblem on the chest. And not often you get to wear this gear, so it was cool to put it on again tonight. But Beijing, I said it was on the podium. But London was actually getting the phone call from Nick Green, the chef de mission, to lead the Aussie team into the closing ceremony and carry the flag. That was really cool. And the extra cool thing about it was in Beijing, the review after Athens, what went wrong, or what could affect a bad performance at the Olympic Games. One of the things that Nathan and I agreed on was that we weren't going to, at a World Championship, our families wouldn't come. They wouldn't come to the Olympic Games. It wouldn't come to the World Championship. So why should they come to the Olympic Games? If we want to treat it like any other event, then they're not coming. China wasn't so hard to sell that to our families. You had to get visas. It was hard to get to, unknown. she was then my girlfriend at that stage, but now wife, she ignored me and at least went and got a visa and arranged a hotel and booked a flight, but just didn't tell me. She did tell me she was going to arrive, but she was going to arrive the night before the medal race and I wouldn't have to see her till after the medal race. But my mum and dad, but I guess from an emotional standpoint, my mum, she didn't organise any of that. And when the regatta was going well, she was looking at the results and going, oh yeah, but I won't do it yet because I don't want to jinx him. And they talked about my superstitions. That was mum that made me wear the same bloody clothes and get that stomach ache because the shorts were too tight for me in that first Manly Junior Nationals. But she didn't want to jinx us and didn't want to book any flights or anything. So, but when we knew we would won the gold medal 48 hours out, you know, I remember it was a Friday afternoon and I rang him from the boat ramp. And my mum ended up in tears because the China embassy had closed at midday. She couldn't get a visa. She could get accommodation, she could get a flight, and she could get there for Sunday for the medal race and see the medal ceremony, but she couldn't get there. So every AOC event after that, where my now wife couldn't attend, I'd invite my mum to come along as my plus one. And when I decided to go for another Olympic Games, I actually went and found some accommodation on Portland that my parents were going to be there. I knew the dates because I booked it for them, but I said to them, I'm not going to see them. You can come to the Olympic Games. I'm not going to stop you coming this time. But they used to send me text messages, oh, we're up in London watching this sport today, and just joking. And I found out later that Dad was sitting on the hill with his binoculars, making an Excel spreadsheet of all the mark roundings, and which he submitted to me later on as an analysis. But they were there the whole time supporting, but they just stayed in the background because they knew that was the modus operandi. But it was really cool because I broke protocol. It was the morning was the night after our medal ceremony, and we went to the inn, it was called, down in Portland, that the Aussies had hired out. And it was just a big party, big piss up. There was Bundaberg rum there. There was all the TV cameras. There was the locals because we didn't close it from the locals, but we just said come along. So it was just a big party. I remember not being able to drink much because the breakfast shows would start at midnight and everyone would be whipping a glass of champagne or Bundy rum out of your hands for some interview or something. And I remember I even got handcuffed that night because one of my good mates, Carter Jackson, who just appeared, I didn't even know he was coming, ended up there that night, and he talked the cop into giving him, of all people, the handcuffs, and so he locked me up there for a little while. But I stayed outside the village that night, which was against AOC principles, but I stayed with my family that night, and I was with my mum and dad and now wife when I got the phone call from Nick Green at 5 minutes to 9 that morning. And I remember him talking away, oh, we'd like to carry the flag, are you okay with that? And talk. And I started talking back to him. He goes, Patey, you're going to answer the question. I need your permission. It's like, what? You mean I've got to say yes? Of course. But the cool thing was there to be with especially my mum. Obviously, my now wife was there in Beijing to see the medal ceremony, but my mum was there to experience that, and she burst into tears and whatnot. And then the ASC managed to get 3 tickets. So my mum, dad, and wife, she was wife in London, yeah, she was wife, got front row seats at the closing ceremony at the up in the, what do they call that one, up in London, the big stadium. And I actually got to walk over and, give them a kiss and a hug. So it was, really cool. That was my highlight of that Games. So sorry throwing in a couple of extra stories there, Martin, just couldn't help myself.
No, all very interesting. So, true to your word, you finished 470 sailing after the 2012 Games. You went off to World Sailing just for a challenge. You had a media role, head of media. What don't people understand about World Sailing, what goes on there?
Yeah, it's I guess like any sports administration, it's very political. It's very it's hard. And I guess leading up to that, I actually spent 8 years on the World Sailing Athletes Commission, and the last 4 I was actually chairperson. And that was the first quad, and it was in many ways an IOC mandate to all international federations, which then obviously passed down to national federations. But to have a athlete rep on the board, and so that was the first quad they got to do that. So although I was non-voting because they hadn't got to that, they hadn't changed the constitution yet, but it was, you know, Carlo Croce, who was the president at the time, really embraced it, and it also led to the full athletes commission actually really integrating to all the committees that go on, and I guess through that is where I really, and it's sort of part of me anyway, that I want to, well, firstly I want to work in sport. That's what makes me tick. But secondly, I'm, you know, if you don't like what you're seeing, well then get your hands dirty and get in there and try to fix it. So I have no qualifications in media. I'm an electrical engineer by of all things. So, but I was obviously excited to do it because I felt that the sport could do better. I had the connection with the athletes. I knew the struggle that the athletes, and I came from a very fortunate country, fortunate situation with one, you know, great coach. And when I say fortunate country, we have amazing conditions and we have amazing governmental financial support. But then thinking about all those other athletes that are striving for that as well, that mightn't have as much as that. And of course, those ones that have more, the bloody Brits. But, you know, I felt like I could help and do more for the sport. And I really enjoyed that time. And but like any job or anything, it's not always up. There's some down, but it was, I really felt like we did some good things. And some of the obvious examples were around the TV coverage, the live TV coverage that came about in that, which is now obviously filtered right through to the Olympic Games. And, you know, we even see America's Cup and the levels that they've taken it to now. And also just getting better connection with the athletes and hearing some of those stories. You know, I think back one story, and obviously quite fond of me, around the 470 is the South Africans making the Olympic Games. They made their first Olympic Games in London and did it again in Rio. And it was a white, affluent guy, came from a well-to-do family with a black guy from a shanty that found sailing when he was 15 years old just by chance through a development program that allowed him to go down and have a sail near Cape Town. And then he made Olympic Games and sailed with this white guy. So the black guy steering the white guy on wire. And to me, that was just an amazing story that, you know, should be told. It's not always about the wins, it's about the stories behind it. And I remember we even donated it was actually Tom King and Mark Turnbull's world champion boat, and it was an Olympic spare boat from 2000 that we actually donated to those guys just because we knew what they were doing and what was going on. And yeah, that's just one cool story that I saw on the way that we tried to sell.
And then just for a bit more perspective and a bit more of a challenge, you were given the opportunity to be Chief of US Sailing. So there's the country, wealthiest country in the world, 300 million people, all the technology you could ever want to get your hands on, a strong youth program, but in the modern age have barely won a medal. Mm-hmm. So what a great challenge. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, the Americans actually came hunting for me. I remember they met me at the World Sailing Conference in Barcelona in early November of 2016 and said, "Hey, you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, well, of course I'm interested." But I actually rang the Australians and said, "Look, I might have an opportunity with another country. Is there anything going in Australia?" And obviously at that time they're still going through a review and there was nothing on the table, so timing was a bit poor from that perspective. But yeah, the opportunity came up to to, I guess, get back into the performance side, or the true performance side, which is ultimately, where I want to be, even to this day. And so it was a great opportunity to take up. And all those things you said, Martin, that country has. Before the Tokyo Games, they were still the most medalled country ever in the sport of sailing. Obviously, the Brits have now overtaken them after their five medal winning haul in Tokyo. But they were the most dominant country right up until 1992. And
until the professional era came into being. Yeah.
So 1992, for those who are old enough to remember, was the first Olympic Games where the IOC abolished all amateur rules. And yes, the sport of boxing still maintains it, but it's a international federation decision. And that was the first Olympic Games that the Dream Team basketball could go. So it was the opening of the door for, I guess, Olympic sailing to become, it can become professional, to get rid of the amateur status. Talking to athletes of that time or pre that time, they said they'd be afraid if they got a photo of them that might end up in a paper or in a sailing magazine, because it might mean they're professional. And therefore they would be ineligible to go to the Olympic Games. So it was, I guess, the start or the opening the door of professionalisation within sailing. And the Sydney Games was probably the first time that you really saw that happen. And Sydney Games was the first time the Australians actually had a full-time head coach that worked for the 3 years leading into it, and that was Ian Brown. They employed, I think it was 3 other full-time coaches that used to work across multiple classes. Victor had to do 470 men and women. Remember, the laser coach had to do full rig and the Europe class dinghy, but that was the single female at the time. And Fletch used to do fins and stars and a bit of solings, and he's still missing windsurfers there as well. So it was I guess, times that moved fast. They ended up getting a sports scientist as a first time within the Australian sailing team. So it was, I guess, that evolution or start of the evolution of professionalisation. And you look at today, there is an office down at Middle Harbour Yacht Club there. There is a storage shed, there's a gym, there's a rigging deck that they all can train from. There's what we call a team house, so if the interstate athletes come in, they've got a place to put their head down. We've got a storage shed at Brookvale that houses all the equipment, and we have measurement facilities there that and a tech team that do all our measurement and build our wind gear and put electric pumps in our coach boats to get the water out. The team has obviously evolved quad after quad, and obviously our athletes are now on funding. It's results driven, but on funding that certainly when you're at the top level can be, I would say, pretty close to covering all your expenses. So if you're lucky enough to maybe get some private help here and there along the way, you might even be able to turn it into a bit of a job. But there's obviously a lot of countries out there that are doing that as well. The Brits are certainly the best in that era. It's called it the last 25 years. That's happened to. And while the Americans have fallen off that cliff. So the Americans, I guess, saw my experience and the evolution that I went through from that Sydney time, Australia's rebirth after the Athens failure, and wanted a bit of that experience to come across. So yeah, they got all those components, which I think is incredible. They've got the wealth, they've got the talent, and by all means they have the technology, Silicon Valley there. But they lack cohesion. They lack a system. There is zero government funding for any sport in the US. They have a thing called the Ted Stevens Amateur Sports Act, which is basically making a level playing field. But it drives long and hard within sports. So it means the government will not fund sports. You've got to do it yourself. And of course, traditionally when athletes are fundraising for themselves and driving their own campaign, And when they raise that money, why are they going to share it with their fellow countrymen in the same class when they're going for that one Olympic spot? They're always going to be selfish, and they're going to look for international training partners instead. And they're going to help the Swedes and the Norwegians and whomever to go faster while they're trying to make themselves go faster. So one of those sort of fundamental things that I was trying to drive in there is to create, certainly within each class, a magnet point, and that was to me coaching. And obviously you wanted to be a good coach, a coach they wanted to work with, but if you could take that off their bottom line, it's normally on a campaign cost for a year, a coach would be somewhere around 40-50% of an athlete's budget. So if you can take that away, it's a huge chunk for them.
So, PG, in America where you've got so many billionaires, why can't they all find their own sponsors and find their own coaches, pay the coaches with that money and get on with it? It's not as simple as that.
And actually, this is something that the Americans do way better than the Australians, is actually fundraising. And obviously, we're very fortunate in our sport with the affluency it has and the demographic that's out there. So, we're very fortunate that way, especially when you see those big yachts sailing around the harbour. And they do very well at that. Is it easy for them? Of course, they're not normally marketing people. They've got an education by their side, but they normally are, wanting to be sailors, and a lot of them do a very good job driving that. But again, they're not pooling that development phase that you can do together. I was mentioning to someone earlier this evening over the beer and pizza section that Matt Wern's been back out here after his little hiatus after the Olympic Games. He stayed in Europe. But he's been here for the summer and he's back training full time. But he's from interstate, he's from Perth. And where does he live? He lives in the team house when he's here in Australia. But he needs the laser squad around him to train against, to push him, to make him better. And of course, then they've got that world-class benchmark that they're going to be striving to be better at. The Zacks, the Finns, the Ethans, all those guys are now trying to match Matt Wern. If they can match Matt Wern, they know they've got a pretty good chance on the international level. And that's where, I guess what you just say, healthy rivalry within one country, if you can manage that, and obviously the laser squad has done so in Australia, it is world class. We see the results. 3 Olympic Games in a row, 3 gold medals, 3 different athletes. The British Finn program has done the same. They have won every gold medal since Sydney 2000 right up to Tokyo 2020. So was that 5 or 6 gold medals in a row? 3 different athletes. So it can be done, and when it's done right, you are driving development and protecting that IP from the rest of the world.
So you tried to bring that in. In fact, you did bring it in. I think Treasure Island, is it called, in San Francisco Bay area. So you moved the office across from the east coast to the west coast, set up a camp headquarters, a bit like we have Middle Harbour here.
Yep.
Did that work well?
I wouldn't say it was complete the time I left. I think the idea was right, and it was backed by some local community. Very well, all the yacht clubs in the Bay Area created another charity group called FAST, and it was an acronym. But basically it meant technology and the development of the athletes. And one of the reasons why San Fran was chosen, or Treasure Island's position is amazing. It's right in the middle of the Bay Bridge. It also has amazing access to the city front, which is obviously the huge sea breeze, cold, strong wind, with sharks. You got, makes you sail better. You got the Berkeley Circle, which is a little less windy but shallower water and less current. Or you can go under the bridge into what they call the South Bay, and completely light conditions. If it's 25 knots on the city front, it's probably like 10, 12 knots in the South Bay. And it had an amazing position to be able to bridge all those areas. Also sitting in the heart of Silicon Valley, and obviously great education system. So the plan of that was not only to have the sailing facilities and the water access, but have the technology base out of there as well, to tap into the education system, so the kids could hopefully go to universities there and be part of that program and developing themselves, because it's obviously a multiple quad journey for these athletes, but they obviously want, well, certainly the parents want them to get an education, and of course there's benefits of using some of those universities from certainly a technology and graduates in there helping you. So to me, although a very expensive city, it had some amazing things going for it, and Treasure Island was an old, well, it used to be an old air base, then turned into a Navy base, and got handed back to the government, the local government, many years earlier. And all the soils were contaminated from the Navy days, and so it had quite a long regeneration cycle of it, and there was a lot of free land well, not free per se, but opportunities to develop stuff there, and that's why it was sort of chosen as a spot for not only the great sailing conditions, but also there's other environmental things which help athletes, I guess, build themselves up as people, and their support network, their parents and whatnot, to continue.
Isn't it also an island for disadvantaged kids who are then introduced to sailing?
So we partnered with a program they had the facilities on the island. They started, well, now it's over 20 years ago, about 20 years earlier, and a husband and wife team started it. He was an Olympian. She tried for the Olympics, missed, got second in the trials, but both very good sailors, and that's sort of where their heart lied from I guess from a giving back standpoint, and they started up that centre 20 years earlier. But apparently they did, because I saw the mission statement, they put into that 20 years earlier that they wanted to make this a place that could develop someone from the grassroots all the way up to hopefully an Olympic podium. And I guess them hearing my vision when I got into that country, I remember the first time I was at San Francisco Yacht Club, which is a beautiful yacht club there on the city front. I remember talking to those guys there, a lot of people I knew, and talking about my vision, and they had this little smirk on their face at the end of the meeting. I said, "Oh, great, so when will I see you next?" "Okay, we'll see you in 6 weeks' time." So I went back to the East Coast and came back out in 6 weeks' time, and they said, "Our meeting's going to be on Treasure Island," and they presented it to me in this little shack that was falling down, that had these disadvantaged kids there sailing, and they presented this idea of FAST, coupling on to that program and encompassing that vision that I had, and saying we want to help build that here on the West Coast. And I guess I saw that magnet point. There was a US training center already in Miami. That was where the World Cup events hosted from, and had a good prominence. And then getting one on the West Coast was a huge advantage. And I actually said to them, "If you do that, I'll move here." Of course, it was a bit like a big Sydney, so that made it good for me. But saying that, I said, "If you can do this and deliver it, I will move to the East Coast." So yeah, we made the head office, the US sailing team head office, move over there. Obviously, US sailing stayed in Rhode Island, but yeah.
You mentioned the universities before, the college system over there. Is that the problem, or part of the problem, or is that the opportunity, do you think?
Yeah, I heard that many times when I was over there, and trust me, the college coaches used to look at me sideways, squinting and saying, "What are you trying to do?" But I don't see it as a disadvantage.
But if they're all sailing non-technical boats, FJs, 420s and the like, the college system is all-encompassing. It's a lifestyle. You're living away from home. It's full on. College sailing is, I think, pretty well all year round, isn't it?
Well, let me...
How can you... And then you graduate at 22 or 23 or whatever. How do you fit in an Olympic campaign, and why would you do it? And there's no funding.
Let me answer it partly this way. Who would have thought a very simple non-technical boat like a laser gold medalists like Tom Slingsby or Ben Ainslie could sail F50s. And to me, good sailors can sail boats. Doesn't matter if it's foiling, doesn't matter if it's displacement, doesn't matter if it's one sail or multiple sails. All boats display water, and they can sail boats. So to me, them sailing those non-technical 420s, FJs over there is not the issue.
Right.
And they are very talented sailors. You know, the college system can create, they get very good at starting, they get very good at crew work. They're actually sail mixed, have done for a very long time. So there's some great components of it. They do a lot of short course, long days sailing, so they're building resilience. So there's a lot of skills there that they're developing, but it's not the complete set of skills that are required to be an Olympic champion. So, yeah, then the next problems come. They're starting a little later. I don't think that's a problem in our sport.
You started later.
I started when I was 25 years old and finished when I was 40. So, you know, we're lucky in our sport that, you know, as I say, what you lose here, you gain here, and you can go just as fast around a racetrack. So, you know, maybe other sports where it's more time on distance or can be measured that way, it's more important. Your window of opportunities you're younger and shorter. But, you know, that's not the problem. The problem is that support and how do they do it, because it's a multi-quad program these days. Matt Belcher's first Olympic Games, yes, he won a gold medal, but he'd been campaigning for 12 to 13 years already. Matt Wern won a gold medal at his first Olympic Games, but he'd been campaigning in the laser for about 13 years. I remember him coming on as a youngster around 2010, 2011, he got invited into the squad. So there's a great system that Australia's got, or examples of, but they're not first-time Olympians, even though it might be their first games. They've multi-quads, they've got the scars, they've got the lessons along the way. There's not many, to me in the modern day game, I can only think of two athletes straight off the bat that have done well at the first Olympic Games in their first quad, and that's Robert Scheidt and Ben Ainslie. Every other athlete that I can think of had to get hard lessons along the way and learn how to win, so to speak. Those guys just had that natural ability. So that's the issue that lies in front for the Americans, is how do they make their system sustainable from quad to quad and create that teamwork. Sure, they're going to be this quad, certainly. They look pretty good in the sense that they've got a woman's kiteboarder that is, you know, leaps and bounds in front of anybody else. And if she can hold that gap, you know, she'll win the gold medal with her eyes closed. But it's very fortunate in the sense that kiteboarding started at Chrissy Field. Yeah. Which is, you know, just west
San Francisco
of
Bay.
San
I've been down
Francisco
to Chrissy Field a few times when in San Francisco, and you go down there after school hours, you know, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there'll be 100, 200 kiteboarders and foilers out there, kids everywhere. They come out of college or school, their backpacks, it's all on the back of them, catch the bus, and they're into it for hours.
Yep. And Daniela Moroz was born into that system, and so she's only, I think 20 now, 21 maybe, and she's won the last 5 world championships in a row, or 5 or 6. So it's incredible.
So the new classes might be an opportunity for them.
Exactly, and certainly that's one that's obvious. But the others, they've got a lot of development to do. Some are better than others, of course, and it's probably the same situation for Australia in many ways with the new classes that are in place now. There's 470 is strong for many years now, but now it's gone mixed, so it's a new thing. It's a new reset in many ways, and so that's been lost. And you know, really, we've only got the laser class at the moment. It's in a strong medal position from the Australian standpoint. Yeah, thankfully we've got 2 and a bit years to go, but that's the new reality that we're in.
So your most recent occupation is coaching, elite level coaching. you've learned a lot about coaching along the journey since late 90s. Now you're the coach. Tell us or talk us through some of the principles of coaching. So, at the beginning of the race, we're starting drills and so on. What are some of your favourite drills?
I was lucky enough to learn from a master, and he's actually called Master Coach now. I guess I'd like to take a step back into my principles of how to campaign, I guess. I don't care if you're campaigning for the Little Optimus Club Championship or Olympic gold medal. It's the same principles for me. And I like to use the symbol of a three-legged stool. And each of those legs represents an area that you've got to build. So speed, it's a nice one to describe in one area. Environment and racing ability. They're the three legs. And of course you can break out into each of them. Speed, there's fitness, there's equipment, there's weight, there's how you pull them on and off, the technique. There's all those different factors that can go in that to make up speed. Racing abilities, all those decisions, the strategic, the tactical decisions that you're making, and how do you do them under the heat of the moment, and when that person playing the game of chess opposite you, how do you develop that? And then the environment. Of course, there's what you would say racing local environment. What happens in the southern hemisphere? What happens in this venue? How does the current work? What are all the factors that go in that from that standpoint? But also environment, certainly from an Olympic Games standpoint, is can you live with your roommate? When you go to these venues, do you know where the supermarket is? Can you eat the local food? Do you know how to survive 6 weeks, 3 months away from home? All those environmental factors that influence your performance ultimately. And when you're very good at those areas, and those three legs are complete and equal, that's when the bench, so to speak, is your psychology. And when you have a good, strong foundation like that, you've got a good, strong psychology from your racing. And you'll all feel this, you go out there someday and you just have a crapper race. And you come in and you throw everything out of the pram, like, I'm hopeless, I'm crap, I can't sail anymore, I don't know what happened. You get emotional, or you see at least the Latinos do that all the time. It's great when you see them do that, they're going to fold. But to me, there's a weak psychology there somewhere, or maybe there's a problem within each of those legs. And if you can look at that in a real procedural way, quite often you can get rid of that emotion. And by no means you're trying to get rid of the passion, but you're getting rid of that emotion. So you can come in from the day of racing going, you know what, my game plan was right today. The left did work, but I started bad. I started at the pin and I stuffed my starts, and then I attacked and went right. So okay, that was my problem, starts. Now how do I fix my starts? And you can dive down and find your problem and work on it. So when I'm coaching, and I guess being a student of Victor, we would be trying to build out those three legs all the time. Now to me, if there was any two areas that you had to work on, it would say you need perfect crew work under pressure and always good speed. So we would spend 80% of our time working on that.
So under the heading of speed, there's a whole lot of things, isn't there? That's like minimal rudder use in certain conditions, fair bit of rudder use in certain conditions. Can you talk us through some of that, what you learnt?
So if you're in, God's well theoretically, starting off in no wind, no waves, nothing. As the wind increases, what's your first action? Your body, probably to get about 8 knots. Your body's maxed. What do you do next after that? As the wind is increasing, you start playing big ropes, little ropes. Centerboards up, your foils, so to speak, you're playing with them. And then your last depowering tool, as the wind keeps increasing, is your rudder. That's in a perfect world with no wind shifts, no waves, and that's how you work through a depowering process. Then if it goes the other way and going into a powering up, you want to do the direct opposite. So whenever we go sailing, we would be trying to do that to perfection.
So lock the rudder in,
If
use
possible.
body and trim before the rudder. We're middle-aged office workers here. We like to push the rudder around to balance the boat. Doesn't work.
But in reality, there is those dynamic things. There's a wave. And how do you keep the same angle? Like, let's go ocean swell. If you're going up an ocean wave, how do you keep the same angle of attack on your mainsail in a laser perspective? You've got to steer up the face and then steer down the back. That's how you keep the same apparent wind angle on your sail when you're sailing along. So yes, you need rudder in that scenario. But of course you don't want to be relaxing your body, because that's leaving some riding moment on the table. In light wind, Beijing, we learnt how can we steer the boat through the balance of the jib and the main. How do we control the twist of the centerboard through the accurate balance, and obviously balancing the boat to steer it as well. So if we can weed lock that rudder off, we're creating an extra centerboard that we can push against to create more power. When we have more power, we can go faster. So we were really trying to use those fundamental principles to drive from a speed perspective.
And in those conditions, you're managing the variations between more power, less drag. When do you apply more power? When do you say it's not going to work? We need to go for less drag.
This day and age, there's a lot of technology that can start to help you in that process. There's a tool that's out there at the moment in the Olympic world called TrueSail that, oh, look at that.
Big tool.
Didn't even know. That can actually, well, so it's got a few things on it. It can clip on the end of your boom. So that is a 49er bracket. So their outhaul clue tack strop goes around that, and that's a tension gauge that can read that. There's a little unit that goes on at the gooseneck, and that can read the amplitude and the frequency of your boom play. There's another one that goes on your rudder that reads the same there. And then there's a unit that goes on the boat, which is also a display, but that unit will read pitch and heel as well. And then you can have up to 4 units on 4 different boats with a controlling unit back at the coach boat.
So you're benchmarking against all 4 boats, and you can see that, I'm shoving the rudder around, you're not, hence you're going
Correct.
quicker.
Yep. And you're playing your boom twice as much, but half the distance.
And my bow's pitching up and down like.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So you can do comparisons with that. And obviously with the display, you can put a live, only one of those things, but you can put a unit of measurement up so the sailor can actually see it and reference it in training only, of course. Yeah. But that's something that they can use this day and age. Back in the old days, we used to just do it with another boat. You reference off another boat and you try it. Yeah, one goes to leeward, one goes to windward, and you just keep swapping it, trying it and pushing, and try this. You change this, you don't change, and you reference yourself and learn those things.
So that data analysis, the risk with that is that it takes up a lot of time analysing it, and often what you already know about the different boats. But I would guess that it just validates what you're telling the athletes. If athletes that are good sailors are probably in denial quite a lot, like we tend to be. Do you use it as a coach to validate what you're saying?
It is certainly an art to use technology well. The question I always ask when we get proposed or given or have some new technology thing is, so how's that going to help the athletes go faster ultimately? How does that help them develop that? And how does it help me do my job more efficiently? Because otherwise it could just be a distraction. To get all this data, to combine it all, to crunch it, to make into a report can take hours. it's a hard thing, and it's certainly probably my weakest area too. So, but it's a great data point, non emotional or with opinion, a number. So if there's a message that you're trying to send to an athlete or prove to an athlete, it can be a great tool for that, because it doesn't lie. If boat A is going faster all the time and boat A is doing what you want boat B to do, well, you want to go faster?
But within countries, a lot of this information, as I understand, is quite classified. Is there a risk that it can get out?
Of course.
Someone sends it to the US or wherever?
Of course, this TrueScale stuff was designed in the UK. Ex-British coach with a friend who's a programmer. So yeah, there's always that risk. He have done contracts with each team that the data will not be shared between them. Yeah, but again, it's one of the things that I guess happens in all sports, but it's obviously very prominent in our sport because we're such a heavy equipment-related sport. Yeah, on race day, you're not allowed to have any of this equipment. You're not even. The most boats, all they allowed is a digital compass that has no memory. They're not even allowed GPS watches. They'll be disqualified if they have GPS watches at the Olympic Games. Actually, at the Tokyo Games, we as coaches weren't even allowed weather gear, electronic weather gear. We had to drop that. Wouldn't even let us take our mobile phones on the water because they thought we might gather or share information, certainly the big countries. But of course, we can use all that technology in the development phase, in the training phase, and that is something that, of course, is happening, everywhere, every day. I had a meeting today actually about a program that can use GoPros, because GoPros these days have the pitch and heel can all be read in that while it's videoing. It's all GPS time stamped. Therefore, you can combine it into the program with your Garmin watch, so you can see the heart rate of the athlete. We can tie in the weather gear that's on my coach boat, so we can tie that in, so we can get a more time-stamped scenario of that footage. There's software automatic detects movements, so it can drive a quicker report for you when you get ashore, which is a great thing from a coaching standpoint when you're under-resourced, or even for the athlete. He can go, oh, I remember it was on that leg and that race or that moment. You can go back and see that on the video and see what the good thing was, or maybe the bad thing, whatever they're trying to learn from. So you can save time. And there's a lot of other inputs that we can put in there too. You can put tension gauges these days that are quite cost effective. You whack them on your outhaul to get the leach tension. You can put them on the forestay to get your forestay tension. So there's a lot of other things that you could tie in there as well. But again, how do you do it effectively to be efficient?
One of the less scientific aspects that coaches try to coach, and a lot of people get lost with, is feel. It's a vague term. What does feel mean? How do you teach feel? Because if you can't feel what's going on, you're not really going to progress very well.
How do you coach it? It's probably hard to say how do you coach it. I think the way to, identify it for the athletes is to ask the right questions. And if you can ask the right questions, you can normally get to the bottom of the problem. Obviously, I'm working in a double-handed boat with 3 sails normally. Well, let's just talk upwind, so it's only 2 sails at any one time. But, firstly we can measure what the rake of the rudder is, which will create a certain amount of load. And then with that, then I guess the communication to the skipper especially is, what do you feel? What do you feel at these moments? What are those stuff that's happening? Oh, okay, so if that's what you feel, then what's the theoretical thing maybe driving that? If we change this or change that, what's it going to do? Right, so that's something the crew's got to do. Now, how do you communicate that to them so you can get this sort of loop going with the right questioning? but there's nothing like being beaten to prove something. I mean that in a positive sense. I know I said beaten, but if someone is faster than you, you're going to want to know why. And if you can, certainly from a coaching standpoint, see that from outside and relay that message, that's an instant shortcut for that person to try and to develop. And I have very much have a motto that I do with my athletes. It's like, it's not about, certainly not about me anymore, about being an athlete. You're the chosen one. I want you to invent something new. I want you to take something to a new level. That's the attitude, the approach we've got to have. I want you to invent a technique in the 470 that's going to be named after your team, because you've innovated something. And that's like a mindset that I keep trying to push. Victor did it with us, but it's a mindset we keep want to push. So it's good for the equipment development. It's good for that mindset. It's good for that skill development that will take them to the heights, hopefully.
One of the new techniques that seems to be emerging over the last 10 years or so is all this pumping, leech flicking. There's some unsavoury terms that the 470 guys use that we don't talk about in this club. But all that bouncing on the wire, that would have been starting about the time you were finishing. It's very, very physical now. We all watch the last games.
Yeah.
How do you coach all that stuff? It's a lot of it's timing, fitness, all those things, I guess.
Yeah, yes, it did start certainly in that last quad. And I guess in my time in the 470 from that late 90s, it was a 12 knot pumping limit. So 12 knots above, the pumping flag used to go up. Got reduced to 10, they got it reduced to 8. So the 8 knots zone is where that really started to come prominent. I must admit, I said, it won't work. It won't be fast in that. Because often they put it up at 8 knots and then it drops to 6. I said, it won't work. That's too much shaking, too much carrying on. But sure enough, it did work. And as an old man, that sucked. And here I am trying to compete with, mid-20-year-olds, certainly from that physicality standpoint. But I would say now the 470 crews, and Will Ryan was a perfect example of that, they are one of the fittest positions in our Olympic sport now. And I'd say equally as fit as those windsurfer sailors that are pumping the whole time around the racetrack. It's a nice little cockroach crawling across the floor over there. Sorry about that. But they are super fit. Will is a machine from a fitness standpoint. He's got to be light, but he was ripped. He had a 8-pack. In his days off, when he was staying up at Coal Point at his family's house, he'd go and ride there's one hill over there, I don't know what the name of it is, out west of Newcastle, but he would go and ride that something like 25 times in a day. So he was doing, I think, in the vicinity of 150 kilometres just climbing a hill all day long. He was out paddling it, early in the morning, driving his rib out under the bridge and then anchor it just inside the heads and paddling out in the ocean every morning. And yeah, he was super fit. And as I said, I would have said equally of all the positions and disciplines within our Olympic sport, he was right up there.
All the rolling that various classes are doing now, we see it a lot in the lasers. We see it in the fin class, very exaggerated. We see it in the star class, the 470s. It's largely about timing, isn't it? Do the 470s allow that from 8 knots and above, and do you need to do it in combination with turning the boat, which we do in lasers, of course?
So 470s just raised it back up to 10 knots, and that's obviously part of the mixed thing because they want to, I guess, try to keep it, equal opportunity for female crews as well as male crews. So they're trying to, even the level field there from a physicality standpoint. Back to the principle I said, first body, sail second, rudder third. So when you're steering your boat through your body, which is changing your hull shape and sails, you're helping steer the boat, so therefore you need less rudder, less brake on your boat. So part of that swinging of the sail is, I guess, showing what your body movement's doing to create the hull shape, and obviously putting your main sheet on when you want to go higher, and letting your main sheet off when you want to go lower from a laser standpoint. Also, and if you guys want to go researching, there's a PhD student called Riley Shutt in the US that actually did his PhD on a laser and why the S-ing, so to speak, helped. And he actually worked out there's some vortexes that can create more power with that fanning effect, and how it creates more power, so therefore you got more speed as well. It's pretty weird, hey, that you're not doing the straightest line. The fastest line is not the straightest line between the two marks, but actually S-ing but they are the other reasons why some of those vortexes. Same thing happens in 470. To me, the same thing happens in every class. It's just what, again, back to why classes add up to 10, what that boat allows. Laser uses apparent wind just like a NACRA 17 foiling, but they have a little higher percentage in the NACRA than the laser. Same with the 470 there, and obviously with the rules of the kinetics that are allowed, it creates the opportunity for S-ing and a lot of body movement that helps propelling the boat along. But we can't do such big angles like lasers because we've got side stays and booms only can go out so far. And of course we have a more symmetrical setup with a spinnaker on one side and a mainsail on the other. So the boat's a little bit more balanced in that sense. So, but yeah, to me, all those boats have that same principle. You know, an NACRA 17 is still going up and down, it's just their range is smaller, and because they're using more apparent wind to maintain that.
But what these faster boats that you've coached, like the 49ers, 470s, perhaps can do a bit better than lasers is this other new element of sailing, which is mode sailing. Probably not new to you, but for most of us club sailors, it's something we've learnt, I don't know, in the last 10 years or so. It's all a bit mysterious to a lot of us. But the idea of sailing in a lift or gust, sailing low mode, sailing high in the lulls, do you think that works in a laser as well as a 49er?
Without a doubt. And you could almost say back in the day, back in the old age, you know, upwinds was where you had to work hard. That's where you made the difference, and the downwind was just the relaxed time before you could get to your next upwind. But you know, the modern day game, the downwinds have become the moments where you can make a big difference. Maybe save your race, or maybe make your race. So yeah, downwinds have become a huge development area, and you know, you talked about feel earlier on. It's sometimes a little better feel or technique or whatever it is of being able to produce a better downwind VMG. You can make a huge difference.
Because there's more range of angles available to you.
Exactly.
But even what we're learning now with upwind sailing, there's a slight range of angles. You know, you can drop the bow by 2, 3, 4 degrees or whatever, and you can make a VMG and VMC improvement.
I remember when Tom learned to play an upwind, the laser.
Yeah. I think at first, Tom told me once that I don't think it'll work in a laser, but he really conquered it. He led the world in that with lasers. Yep,
I remember he used to win by half a leg sometime because he was that good at it. But yeah, I don't know, it's back to that principle, how do you innovate something? You know, I think there's always room and opportunity for it. And I'm going to contradict myself here a little bit, but the boat in the whatever wind condition with equipment has a maximum potential speed for that moment, for that second, and each second could be different. But then how do you, as the human beings, keep close to maximum and use the maximal potential VMG all the time, upwind and downwind.
So
And
you would play with that a lot in Olympic sailing. Do you use polar charts to figure out your best angles in certain conditions?
Of course, certainly from a training standpoint, we have GPSs that can drive all that and work out target speeds and whatnot. So yes, by all means you do that. But in the middle of the race, it's up to the athlete to be able to do that and know what to do next. So although we can use all those technologies to prove something, it's got to be inbuilt, it's got to be in the toolkit and ready to be used in the heat of the battle at all times. So yeah, it's a huge area. I know the laser squad, although it didn't happen because of the big conditions, they were planning to, in the southerly last week, to launch down at Botany Bay and do some downwind sailing, just to practice that, to get yourself, the waves ended up being too big and it's probably a little dangerous.
What about the use of drones, speaking of technology, where I'd imagine it's useful for looking at teamwork, tacks, jibes, pitch movement. Whenever you see a drone filming a boat, it's unbelievable how much that mast is moving fore and aft, whereas you don't feel that when you're sitting in the boat so much.
Yeah, drones give you an amazing perspective. That's not something that we're actively using in the Australian sailing team. It has been tried, but it's I guess you're normally just one coach in a coach boat with multiple boats, so it's hard enough just to keep the group together and keep it effective. So again, it comes back to that efficiency standpoint. By all means, it helps to give you another perspective, but it's almost like you need another person that can drive that and drive the reports and give you that information as well. So it's and all Olympic programs are like that. I know even the Brits, who are the most well-funded and also the most successful, they would say that they run out of money. They need more money to do more, and it's that's the balance that you play in the Olympic game all the time. And also, I guess from a drone standpoint, I think it could be really good from a tactical strategic standpoint around regattas. But it's not allowed in regattas. Most regattas, or certainly the prominent regattas, will not allow you to do that. They actually ruled it out. That coaches, or what they call MNAs, which is the each country represented, are not allowed to bring. Of course, the media from the event will, but not the individual countries are allowed. So, but again, most of those events now have trackers, so you can get on your SAP software and look at those reports, and I guess still get that bird eye view, so to speak, but it's just not as pretty. It's animated boats.
Well, it made the last Olympics for the public, I think. Was all that tracker information available to you as coaches, you in Japan?
Once we got back ashore, yes.
Not on the water, of course.
Not on the water. We had no electronics on water. We're not allowed.
Yep.
So with no, let's say, outside world connection. The only thing we were allowed to carry was a VHF radio, from a safety standpoint, apparently.
So now moving forward, you're coaching the 470s, a mixed team that brings with it complications, two genders in the one boat, people travelling together, finding the right combinations, whether it's might not be a small female steering with a strong male on the wire. May not. The Croatians that I think you're up against, or was that in Rio? They were upside down. They had the smaller guy on the wire,
Yep.
which was not normal, but they did well.
Yep. Won
medals.
It's going to be a really interesting thing to find out within the 470 world what is best, and the two strongest teams in Australia, which is my sole responsibility. They've got the combination around either way, and actually you say the A boat at the moment is a male helm with a female on the wire. So, but it's really interesting to get overseas and to find out where we are. Got to remember, a lot of these athletes have been hidden now for over 2 years. So that, I talked about one leg of that stool is racing ability. They haven't been able to develop that now for 2 years, and that goes across a lot of our classes. And the Matt Werns might have a good bank, but there's other people that haven't. So Chris Charwood and Amelia Catt, they have been together now over 2 years as a team, but they've never done an international event yet. They were in Palma for the 470 World Championships in early 2020, had their boat in the measurement queue when the regatta got cancelled, the pandemic had hit. Australian government said get back to the country now, and so they have never done an international event. They've done 2 this summer in Australia, the 470 Nationals, with a total of 8 boats, was it 10 boats, something like that, and then Sale Melbourne, which had 8 boats. I think so it was 10 and then 8 boats. So it's going to be a really new environment for a lot of these people in a couple of weeks' time, and in Europe, where we're going to, the 470s at the moment, I think have 70 odd entries already. So chances are we're probably going to be in 2 fleets of 35, and it's going to be a real eye-opener to one from a racing standpoint, but also to see what is the best combination from this mixed standpoint, because the class has had a semi-reset from that perspective. So yeah, we're going very eyes wide open, trying not to put many results expectations on it, and really looking at our first 2 trips to Europe at least as a development measurement standpoint of the holes that I'm sure we're going to have, and then our 3rd trip will be the World Championship, and hopefully we'll know by then what is a good target, and hopefully we hit it.
Okay, speaking of overseas, and we're getting to the back end of this now. You are extremely well travelled. You've been all around the world sailing. Just give me in one sentence a description of these places where you've sailed. Garda.
Awesome place to train, awesome place to have good food and good Chianti, or you can go bike riding. So place to race.
Yeah, it's a one-way track.
One-way track.
Yep. Okay.
Boring.
Palma. Mallorca, isn't it? Spain.
It's okay.
Ooh. Barcelona.
Oh, now you're talking. That's a cool venue. Very, believe it or not, even though it's the Med, it's quite a swell, cross swell sort of venue. Gets a lot of washback off the headlands, and can quite often be varied conditions, certainly outside the height of the summer. So yeah, good venue.
Kiel, Germany.
Good sausages and crepes.
Long days, don't the start lines like a million miles out?
I remember one day, because course 470, like the laser safe, so they send you onto the far outside course that's about 12 nautical miles from base, from Schiltzy. I remember this year there was crap wind, they couldn't get an event in, so they sent us out late in the day. Ended up doing 3 races, and I looked at my clock and went, hurly durly. We just finished, and it was 11:15. We didn't get back to the dock to 11:15, and the pizza shop was closed, so we couldn't get dinner. So we're getting takeaways from the servo down the road as our dinner that night. But and we had to be back there at 7 a.m. the next morning to go and to try to do catch-up racing. It was it was awful, but good sausages and crepes.
A few of us double bay guys were in the old Holland in Amsterdam a few years ago, Barnsley. We went out to Medemblik. Good, not good?
Lots of bugs. Either it's blowing a gale, so no bugs, so it's shitty and cold and windy, and if you capsize, don't let it hit the mud because you'll snap your mast. Alternatively, it's hot and sunny and lots of bugs, so you got to keep your mouth closed.
Right. Here's down the southern part of France.
Yeah, no, that's a good event, and certainly the time of year that it is. It's spring. the French food's coming out, the markets are open, spring markets are open, the mistral quite often is still blowing, or even the African breeze is awesome. You get huge waves in there, and yeah, it's a great place.
San Francisco.
Oh yeah, now you're talking. Someone who likes a breeze, it's a cracking spot. Rate it my best in North America.
I think I know the answer to the next question. You've won a gold medal, 2 venues, Beijing and at Weymouth. Preferred venue?
Both got their pros and cons. Actually, Weymouth's going to win easy.
Because you can eat beforehand.
There's not many pros for Beijing, so at least there was some cons for Weymouth. Weymouth is actually a pretty cool venue. Blows good wind, probably more in the stronger category but you can get a mixed bag, and a venue that you can get everything. So you can be inside the Portland Harbour, you can go outside in under Weymouth, you get cross swell at the North Course, go outside, you get current. So we can deliver a lot of variability, and as you're probably starting to gather, I like variability in a racetrack. I like variability in the venue because I think it creates a better champion. Maybe because that's what I wanted as well, but yeah, you've got to be more skilled.
Yeah. All right, I think we're pretty well done there. We're going to bring it to a conclusion. We are so grateful that you've come to our club. I know you've been here many times before. You started 18s for a year or two, I think, didn't you?
Yep.
So you knew our club, but you didn't have to do this. You're a busy guy, you're about to go overseas. Big birthday, is it next week?
Yep, an 01.
An 01. We'd like to just, our Commodore, if you'd like to come up, Andrew.
The video already said what you were born.
I know.
Well, congratulations on all your successes in your career, and we hope you have very many more as a coach now. I'm staggered to think there's a lot in common between Malcolm and me. I'm the angry guy in my boat. There's a small gift from us. Thank you very much for coming and sharing your story.
Thank you, everyone.
And the wrapping's gold, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.